Hello and welcome to the Leighton Cassette Podcast, and today I'll be covering Jaws: The Revenge. Jaws: The Revenge was directed by Joseph Sargent, who received a call from Universal head Sid Sheinberg in September 1986 asking him to direct and produce the movie. However, no script was written yet. Sargent said the premise was born out of desperation to find something fresh to do with the franchise and took a mystical point of view. Michael de Guzman penned the script. Lorraine Gary returned to play Ellen Brody after being absent in the last film. Her husband Martin Brody is deceased in this film. Lance Guest plays Michael Brody, Mario Van Peebles plays Jake, Karen Young plays Michael's wife Carla Brody, and Judith Barcy as their daughter Thea, Michael Caine as Hoagie Newcomb, and Mitchell Anderson as Sean Brody. One reason Lorraine Gary returned was the idea of an on-screen romance with Michael Caine. Caine himself had mixed feelings about the film. He was unable to accept an Oscar he had won because they had to refilm the ending of the movie, and he also claims he has never seen the film. However, he says, "I have seen the house it built, and it is terrific," because apparently he used his salary from the movie to build his home. Principal photography took place at Martha's Vineyard and the Bahamas, and also some on the Universal lot. Production started on February 2nd, 1987. Snowstorms had blanketed the island of Martha's Vineyard for over a month, and since the film had to be ready for release in July, and the mechanical shark had to be in warm water for it to work properly, Amity only makes a cameo appearance in the film. The cast and crew then moved to the Bahamas February 9th. They encountered weather problems complicating the 38-day shoot. This was one of the quickest movies ever made, going from literally nothing at all to having a crew hired, script, production, release in under a year. Now we have a continuity issue in Jaws 3. A continuity issue from Jaws 3 to this one, as Mike was an engineer in Jaws 3. And in this one, he is a marine research scientist. Maybe he had a dual major, but I doubt it. One of the Universal press releases calls Jaws: The Revenge the third film in the Jaws trilogy, so I guess we can assume they are ignoring the events of Jaws 3 altogether. Jaws: The Revenge opened July 17, 1987, and made $51 million against a $23 million budget. Well, let's get into this shit show, shall we? We start off underwater again in the credits, and there is a lot of pollution in the Bay of Amity, and I'm wondering if this is supposed to be a PSA. We know it's Amity because the camera keeps coming up and gliding along the water and then diving back down. The score in the opening sucks. We see a very old-looking Mrs. Brody cooking dinner and talking to her son, Sean. Thea, Michael's daughter, calls to talk to her grandmother and her uncle. It's Christmas time, and Sean and his mother and Sean's fiancée Tiffany argue over what size tree to get. And we also learn Sean has followed in his father's footsteps and has become a police officer on Amity. We see a picture of Martin Brody on the wall in the police station. And just as Sean is set to leave for the night, a call comes in about clearing a log from a buoy. And he heads off to deal with it as the other officer is unavailable due to some teens engaging in cow tipping. Not sure why this log is such a big deal, but the receptionist lady at the police station says it needs cleared before the fishermen come in the morning. Now we see some kids caroling as Sean heads to his boat. Sean approaches the buoy and attempts to free the log. As he does, we see him from the shark's perspective, and suddenly the shark jumps out of the water and takes his fucking arm off. Sean screams, "Help me," towards the town like an asshole instead of, I don't know, trying to drive the fucking boat back. The shark jumps out of the water again, and we get a bunch of jump cuts of the shark attacking Sean as the carolers sing Noel. After all these jump cuts, we see a big hole in the back of the boat, Sean attempting to swim and screaming help, and we see the boat sinking and Sean finally pulled under, and a rush of red come to the surface with the log he was clinging to with bite marks all over it. The next day, we see Ellen going to identify her son's body, with the other cop and the receptionist both looking distraught. I assume this isn't Deputy Dumbfuck who became Chief Cocksucker. It doesn't seem like him, but they don't use any other names. But Mike and his family arrive with his daughter happy as fuck. She obviously doesn't understand the concept of death. We get cameos of one of the town council members from the first two movies and Mrs. Kittner, the old-looking mother of the boy that was killed in the first one. Thea says to them, and I found this morbidly hilarious, "Uncle Sean is dead, you know." I find it odd these ladies were Ellens because of the events of the first two, but I can only assume the blame was eventually put exactly where it belonged, and that is on that piece of shit Mayor Vaughn. Mike goes outside to talk to his mother. Ellen says the shark came for him. Ellen tells Michael that night she wants him to quit his job and never go near the water again. She then tears through the kitchen like a fucking tornado, insisting on making dinner for them. She says the shark came for Sean and her late husband, but Mike reminds her Martin died from a heart attack, but she insists it was the fear of the shark that killed her husband. Mike tells her that great whites don't like warm water where he lives in the Bahamas. Mike walks with his wife on the beach the next day, lamenting that his brother died over a piece of wood. And then Mike takes off running like a fucking madman, leaving his wife standing on the beach like a dick. And we cut to the funeral. We see Ellen smiling like a fucking psychopath. Then we see flashbacks to the dinner scene in the first movie of Sean interacting with his father when he was mimicking his every move. And that's what she was remembering, so at least we see why she was smiling. Mike tries to talk his mother into moving in with him and his wife and daughter, since there is no more family in Amity. She does agree after some, reluctance. They board the ferry that afternoon, and Ellen has a breakdown with the worst fake crying you will ever see. We are introduced to Hoagie, who is flying the family in a plane in the Bahamas. Easy for me to say, Jesus. He lets Thea sit on his lap and steer the plane. They arrive at their house, and Ellen about has a heart attack when she sees Thea swinging on a rope above the water. They have at the end of a dock, what looks like a doorway looking type thing, they have a rope tied to the top of it, and she was just swinging out above the ocean. Thea is pissed when they tell her to get off, and her mother goes and grabs her, that they won't let her swing. She isn't having any of that shit. Mike takes his mother to show her around the island. Next thing we see is Ellen swimming in the ocean, which is weird because Martin's fear of water has rubbed off on her. When she starts getting attacked by a shark, it's a dream, of course, and she wakes up startled. We see Mike in a sub underwater tagging some snails and arguing with someone he works with about how slow he is going, before they make up and horse around on the boat. This is Mike's friend and co-worker Jake. This is our introduction to Jake. We see the family exchanging Christmas gifts the next morning, with Jake and his wife joining them. Ellen tells stories about Mike as a kid happily, when Thea decides to be a fucking mood killer by asking about her Uncle Sean. Some phenomenal accents by Jake and his wife. The "Ya man" type of Jamaican accent, I guess it would be. Ellen goes outside and Mike follows. Again, Ellen wants him to quit his job. We cut to the water and see a shark swimming. Next day, Ellen builds a sandcastle on the beach with her granddaughter and says, "Let's pretend this is Buckingham Palace and you can be Princess Di." She wouldn't want to be saying that in about 10 years. Suddenly, Ellen snaps up and stares at the water. Thea snaps her out of it, and Hoagie rows up by where they are building the sandcastle. We cut to Mike and Jake working and bantering about the money being about out for their research. We then cut back to Hoagie and Ellen talking. She tells him her theory on the shark, how the shark follows her and her family, and it's out for revenge on her and her family. And she asks for a ride on the plane. And when she turns, we see by the look on Hoagie's face that he wants her to take a ride on something all right. He takes her for a ride, and they end up at a local festival. It's Jake's turn to tag some snails, and we see the shark swim beside him while he's in the sub. The shark then jumps out of the water and attempts to get Mike while Mike's on the boat. Ellen must be psychic because she gets worried when the shark tries to get Mike before trying to brush it off and dancing with Hoagie at the festival. Jake is excited about the prospect of studying the shark while Mike looks shook. Hoagie and Ellen return to her son's house, and they laugh and joke on the porch. Mike watches and looks pissed, but forgets all about it when his wife flings her panties at him. We go to a casino, and Hoagie is on a streak, but he ends up losing. We heard in the first plane ride when he was taking the family to their house, to the island, that he has a bit of a gambling problem. And they are all here celebrating New Year's. They all, as in Mike, his family, Jake, his wife, and Hoagie. Jake almost spills the beans about the shark, something Mike made him promise not to say anything about in front of his mother. Ellen and Hoagie dance, and then Mike goes and cuts in. And a very weird thing when he asks Hoagie to cut in, Hoagie says, "This world would be a lot better place if sons danced with their mothers." The fuck is that supposed to mean exactly? I don't know. He tells her he doesn't trust Hoagie, and she says she likes him, and she is going to let her shark obsession go. Mike still looks worried. Mike arrives at the boat the next day, and Jake has made a contraption to listen to the shark's heartbeat. Mike gets pissed and is about to leave over Jake's wanting to study the shark, but Jake makes a deal that they will study the shark for a few days and then go back to the snails. Mike and his wife argue over him forgetting to set the garbage out. Apparently, we learn from this argument that it's a repeat occurrence. They make up and fuck in their garage with the door open. Mike's wife is a welder or artist. She's making a piece of art for the island, and she's welding the son of a bitch together. We then cut to Jake, Mike, and some of their staff on a boat, chumming, when suddenly we see the shark coming towards them. They lower some big animal legs into the water and wait for the shark to take them. Jake stabs him with his contraption into the side of this shitty-looking fake shark, and the shark descends back into the depths of the ocean. Ellen and Hoagie continue their flirtation at a cabana, I guess. Hoagie and Ellen finally kiss, and I lose my appetite. Back on the boat, they follow the shark. Jake calls it an overgrown goldfish, which is pretty hilarious. Mike questions Jake on what he knows about Hoagie. Jake doesn't know much, just that he showed up one day. They lose the shark's heartbeat on the monitor and decide to come back the next day. Ellen excitedly tells her daughter-in-law about Hoagie's kiss, and they chat until Thea interrupts them to have tea with her grandmother. Now Mike wakes up in the middle of the night with a nightmare about the shark. We do get a pretty good bit of Thea imitating her father's every move, much like the Sean and Martin bit. Ellen sends Thea to bed and tells Mike she's leaving for a few days to go with Hoagie. Mike goes to tag some snails, and then Jake says they will spend half a day on the snails and half a day looking for the shark. Jake's monitor starts going off, and he warns Mike that the shark is coming toward him. And Mike gets in the sub to get the fuck out of there. The shark crashes into Mike's sub. More like floats, but whatever. Mike manages to escape and swims along the floor of the ocean. He manages to swim inside a shipwreck, and the shark follows. This is the worst looking shark of the whole series. Seriously, whoever built this piece of shit should be ashamed of themselves. It's worse than the shark in Jaws 3. Mike manages to avoid the shark by opening a man door and swimming through it, and the shark can't fit through. Mike then takes off his air tank and opens it and finagles it, and it rockets him to the surface quick as shit. That's a pretty cool little bit. Jake and the crew pull him from the water. Suddenly, Mike wakes up and is in bed with his wife. And then I think this is a dream, but his conversation with Jake the next day clearly shows that it wasn't. So that part is very confusing. And he has a bandage on his arm. He had a bad cut on his arm. So that whole bit, and then just having Mike wake up in bed is like, what the fuck? Way to confuse the audience. Maybe no one else was confused by it, but I was for sure. Jake doesn't want Mike to go back in the water the next day, but Mike insists. And this is the conversation where I realized that it wasn't a dream. We go to a ceremony where they are unveiling a piece of art Carla's made for the island. Thea asks her mother if she can go on a banana boat with her friends, and Carla agrees. We see the shark following the boat, and Ellen screams, and so does Carla when she sees the fin. Carla's going up to I don't know who he was, just the politician was, talking about Carla and the piece of art she made for the island. Then, of course, as soon as she's about to make her acceptance speech is when, well, I don't know, acceptance speech, but her dedication speech or whatever the fuck you want to call it, whenever the whole shark falling the banana boat thing happens. The shark, slow-mo, jumps out of the boat and gets the leg of a woman and very shittily chomps up and down on her leg. Jake's wife suddenly loses her accent while she is screaming for someone to help the kids. The boat makes it back toward the beach and everyone else is safe. Ellen decides she's had enough of this shit and commandeers a boat at the dock. Mike comes home and goes to apologize to his wife for missing the ceremony, but his wife tells him about the shark, and when Mike tells her he knew the shark was there, she is pissed, and rightly so. Mike and Jake then go to find Ellen, and they come across Hoagie fishing, and he takes them up in the plane to look for her in the boat. And he tells them that Ellen thought the shark followed the Brody family from Amity to the Bahamas. Ellen spots the shark approaching her on the boat, and Hoagie, Jake, and Mike spot her as the shark is approaching. They do a flyby as the shark is trying to eat Ellen, and they do spook it off for a minute. Hoagie lands the plane in the water. Mike and Jake swim over to the boat Ellen is on, and the shark jumps up and tries to eat a Hoagie. The plane then sinks, and Ellen is pissed Mike came after her and says there was nothing else to do when Mike asks her why she took the boat out. But she also doesn't say what her plan was, so who knows what the fuck she was actually thinking. Hoagie then yells for help as he swam to the far side of the boat. I guess he went out the door on the opposite side that the shark was trying to bite on in the plane. The boat won't start, and Hoagie and Ellen attempt to fix it while Mike and Jake make something to kill the shark. Apparently it will electrocute it. From what Jake says, that's what I gathered, but Ellen attempts to start the boat, and it starts, and they wait for the shark to come back so Jake can shove the thing in its mouth, the thing they made. The shark jumps out of the water real slow motion like, and grabs Jake and takes him into the water and descends with him. Jake, however, did get the one of the electrical contraptions he made shoved down inside of him. The shark circles back, and Ellen has some more flashbacks of things she couldn't have possibly seen, such as Sean being killed and Martin killing the first shark on the Orca. Mike messes with the thing he and Jake made, and it seems to drive the shark nuts. Until it quits working, of course. Mike gets it working again, and Ellen drives the boat and rams it right into the front of the shark, fucking exploding it, having impossible flashbacks of Martin killing the first shark the whole time. The boat starts to sink, and we hear Jake yelling for help as he somehow survived. We cut to Hoagie and Ellen departing on a plane, and Ellen telling Mike to take care of Jake, and the credits roll. Positives: Michael Caine and Mario Van Peebles are pretty entertaining, and the kid is also pretty funny herself. The negatives: everything else. If Ellen is so afraid of water, why would she go to the Bahamas? And they totally fucked the continuity from the last movie. I mean, there is literally too many negatives to list. I liked Mike's girlfriend in the last movie, but I do not like this girl who plays his wife at all. Not one damn bit. And it's just, this movie was a tough shit. I mean, Jaws 3 was pretty bad. I didn't have the nostalgia for it that I remembered, but this one, good lord, this one is just fucking awful. Just fucking awful. Overall, this is a garbage movie and a low point for the franchise. It should have never been a franchise to begin with. It should have just been the first movie and maybe the second, because the other two were just terrible. This might be the worst movie I have reviewed so far. It was ill-conceived and not carried out well at all. This movie came out 12 years after the first, and its time is well past. It's an obvious thumbs down for me, which is a shame, because we went from a classic first movie to this horse shit. And this might be the worst fall from grace that, I've reviewed so far on the podcast. Batman and Robin, yeah, that was pretty bad, but even Batman and Robin had a couple redeemable things, and it was at least a little entertaining. Not very, but a little bit. And then the Mummy movies, those were what they were. I love that first Mummy movie, and then the last one's, alright, not bad, but this fall, this is the biggest decline we've seen from the beginning of a franchise to the end of a franchise, without a fucking doubt. Now, I'll attempt to get the bad taste out of my mouth for next week when I review Twister. That's right, Twister, a true mid-90s classic. Don't forget to follow on Twitter and Facebook, and thank you for listening to the Leighton Cassette Podcast.